We can ask the Palestinians suffering genocide in Gaza if they have been saved from hell by an institution that is incapable of mobilizing protection, of ordering a ceasefire, of condemning the perpetrator, or even of naming the crime out loud. Should these, the abandoned peoples of the United Nations, have confidence in the United Nations? No one would dare say that they should.
To the United Nations also came the problem of Palestine, the age-old struggle between Arab and Jew, and the aspirations of the Jewish people for a homeland.
Human rights lawyer Craig Mokhiber worked for the United Nations for 32 years, but quit over the way Palestine was being handled by the global body. In his resignation letter in October 2023, he called events in Gaza a textbook case of genocide. Now, a year on, Mokhiber stands by every word in his letter, but also states that with the backing of the US, the UK, Germany and the West, Israel has the green card to do whatever it pleases.
I left the United Nations precisely because of the atrocities systematically being perpetrated in Palestine, on the West Bank and in Gaza, and what I saw as a failure of international institutions and obviously of governments around the world to address it with the seriousness that this kind of historic horror requires. I think we have seen a complete failure on the part of the post-World War II institutions to address genocide, to address a massive assault on civilians like this. And we have seen that there are no limits, that this can continue to its logical end, which is the destruction of Palestinian society, the purging of Palestinian civilians, the murder of tens of thousands, torture, summary executions, maiming, breaking all world records with regard to the killing of children, the killing of journalists, the killing of aid workers and UN staff, the killing of medical personnel. I mean, we've had to change the balance sheet that's been used to address crises and conflicts and so on around the world because Israel has no limits in its capacity for atrocity. And the international community and states of the West, frankly, states all around the world, even in the Arab region, seem to also have no limits for what they will tolerate.
Israel is on trial for genocide in the World Court, and the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has requested arrest warrants for its Prime Minister and Defense Minister on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Despite this, Tel Aviv has continued its attacks on Gaza and escalated its aggression on the West Bank. The price of global inaction has been high. The UN, unable to protect Palestinians, is now facing a crisis of credibility.
It's damaging the entire framework of international law and international institutions built up since the Second World War, beginning with the UN Charter. People are losing hope, and therefore those institutions are losing legitimacy, and it will not survive without public legitimacy for very long. And the fact that so many Western countries have taken the side of a violating country instead of the side of international law threatens the sustainability of those institutions. And the fact that, I understand, if you speak out against Israel, you are going to be persecuted. That's a reality if you are at the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the United Nations, any of these institutions, you are going to be slandered and smeared and threatened and harassed by trolls. It creates a climate of fear amongst those working within the international system, as it's designed to do.
Over the past year, Mokhiber has dedicated himself to exposing Israel's falsehoods, the Western world's alignment with the propaganda, the international community's failures, and the overall complicity in the ongoing genocide being committed against the Palestinian people. Yet, amidst the grim reality, he finds hope in the growing civil movements, which continue to rise up against authorities and challenge Israel's occupation and destruction of Palestinian land.
The remarkable thing is all of the courageous people, especially in civil society, standing up on college campuses or in the capitals of countries across the world to demonstrate, in spite of the repression, in spite of the smears, in spite of police violence, in spite of being arrested, in spite of being beaten up by thugs from the other side, that they still in their thousands, their hundreds of thousands, ultimately their millions, are standing up against not just what's happening in Palestine, but what the West is doing to underwrite what is happening in Palestine. That's very encouraging. And the fact that the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, in spite of the harassment and the threats and the smears, have been doing their job too slowly, but they have been progressively moving on their mandated responsibilities. That's, I think, where the hope comes from.
1 year on since Israel's latest and most brutal war on Gaza, the question remains, has the United Nations truly failed the Palestinian people? Or is this the beginning of a long and overdue path toward justice and accountability?